Okay, here we go. And go.
So it's kind of crazy how Splash Mountain has taken on a life of its own beyond the film that it's based on, but of course it is based on Song of the South, which was a very, very it was controversial at the time. There were riots and stuff about the movie. It was not critically acclaimed because it's a very racist movie, and I can get into why it's racist. I will choose not to. If you'd like to know, you can look it up. But it's based on a movie called Song of the South that is very racist, and it's like characters from the movie. Is the ride racist? Yes, it is. There are bad representations of what some would imagine to be like it's racist, but it's fine. I'm not one to say it's fine. I'm going to stop talking about how it's racist. Mountain, they needed some more thrill rides. Michael Eisner really wanted to appeal. This was under Michael Eisner. Michael Eisner is sort of notoriously the worst thing that happened to the Disney parks. Do I agree? Not necessarily. But Michael Eisner was the CEO of Disney at the time, and he really wanted to appeal to the teenagers more, because if you think about it, at the time, Disney really did not have many thrill rides. So they wanted to make a thrilling water ride. They were going to call it something else. I don't remember what it was, but he said, no. Call it Splash Mountain. And the reason for that is because the ride was opening at the same time that the movie Splash, starring Tom Hanks, was opening. That is true. He wanted synergy. Many people recently have seen this, but I recommend that you look it up. There's a video of a commercial from Splash Mountain's opening. It's a bunch of dudes like rapping, and like they're hot, and they're like, when you're going down a ride and you're doing a slide, and it's like, oh my god, what is happening? This is so not a ride. It's like, how do you do? So that's Splash Mountain. It took them a really long time to figure out how to do that. That kind of drop had never been done before that big. So the cars kept getting flooded when they were testing it. Like over and over and over again, the cars were getting flooded until they figured out, if you look at the log that you're in, it curves in the front because all that water goes like inside of the curve and splashes back. That's why you don't really get that wet until after, because all that water is flying back. So like you go down, you're like, and then you get wet. Interesting. What else is there to say about Splash? I will say this. Splash Mountain came after America Sings, which was a show in Tomorrowland with all these like American, eagle animatronics. A lot of the animatronics in Splash Mountain, in that last scene on the zippity lady on the boat, are taken straight out of America Sings. Literally, just like they plonk. You look at the birds, like look at videos of America Sings, look at videos of Splash Mountain. It's the same animatronics. They're just there, which is scary because a woman died in America Sings. And one day I'll talk about that another time. But I used to fear that a lot. That like they saw someone die, and now I feel like they're watching me, and I'm gonna die. Anyway, that's it.
Good job.
That was amazing. Wow.
Isn't that something? Okay. 3, 2, 1, go.
So Expedition Everest shows a side of Asia that we don't really get to see unless we go, right? It's not what we imagine, and that's what really a lot of Animal Kingdom does. It shows a trekkier side that I never really even knew about until that ride, which is why it's educational. And Joe Rohde, the Imagineer, who sort of spearheaded everything in Animal Kingdom, not specifically Expedition Everest, but he was, of course, the head of Expedition Everest, because Animal Kingdom is really his story, it's his part. He went online recently, he's been doing these posts on Instagram talking about the details in each ride. The biggest controversy of Expedition Everest is, of course, Disco Yeti.
Yeti.
So if you look up Disco Yeti, you'll find this. Here's what Disco Yeti is that if you can find these amazing videos of there was going to be this giant Yeti animatronic in Expedition Everest, inside the mountain, and it was going to be so cool. And there are videos of it, and it premiered. Like when the ride opened, the thing was moving and it was there. And it's the coolest animatronic that was made up until that point, for sure. I would argue that there are ones that are cooler if you look at the Navi River Shaman, but that was the coolest one up until that point. What was happening was that they had to, in order for the Yeti, it was so big, in order for it to work, they really had to like integrate it into the structure of the building of the mountain. So the mountain was literally falling apart. When this thing was moving, the foundation of the mountain was cracking, and it was not sustainable. So it's called Disco Yeti because they were like, okay, how can we make this scary? They positioned it as close as it could possibly safely be to the car. It is really close. It's still scary. And they just put a strobe light there. Yeah, it's not scary. It's a lot less cool than like you go on this awesome roller coaster and then you're going backwards and then, oh my God, there's this giant fucking Yeti thing. But that's Disco Yeti. And Joe Rohde has been on record many times saying, we're going to fix the Yeti. That is like, yes, it's not our number one most pressing issue, but it is my number one priority is to fix the Yeti in Expedition Everest. Like it was so cool that they wanted to work. And it really was. Like if you look up the videos of the original Yeti, it's the coolest thing. But the ride is along with everything in Animal Kingdom, I think you really have to pay attention. You have to pay attention to the story of the whole. It's a story. It's not a park like the Magic Kingdom is a park where you're like, oh my God, let's go on Space Mountain, whatever. It's more, you have to pay attention to the stories that are being told, because the way that Joe Rohde describes it is like you're looking at a lamppost and you're like, there's no way a person could have put that there on purpose. But they did. Everything was so incredibly deliberate, and they went all around the world to learn about these cultures and buy things that you could only find in this market in India and in this market in Africa. So it's as accurate as it could be, and that absolutely extends to Expedition Everest, and you get some great views of Pandora when you're going up, which was really exciting when it was being built. Done.
Yay!
Good job, Andrew.
Okay, here we go.
All right. Three,
Learn.
3, 2, 1, go.
So, flashback to around 1963, the 1964 World's Fair is coming up, and Disney has a deal with the 1964 World's Fair and a bunch of different organizations to build multiple pavilions. So one of them is, it was called Progress Land, and that's where the Carousel of Progress came from. You also had great moments with Mr. Lincoln, which was the first big audio animatronic of Abraham Lincoln. This is began the new wave of audio animatronics. You also have the Enchanted Tiki Room, all of these amazing attractions happening. They make a deal with Pepsi Cola, and they're looking for some kind of idea, and they sort of have the idea to make it a celebration of UNICEF, the organization UNICEF, and to make it a celebration of nations all around the world. So they come up with this sort of idea of you're going through the different countries in a boat ride. Now, a boat ride in an amusement park, this is something that we're very familiar with now. This had never been done before. There had never been a boat ride in this kind of way, in this kind of mass production. So first they tried one song and it wasn't working with the Sherman Brothers. The Sherman Brothers who wrote music for Mary Poppins, all these things. They were trying to find the hit song for the ride to tie it all together. Finally, the Sherman Brothers, I think it was their secretary, said, "It's a small world." And that's actually how it happened. And they wrote the song "It's a Small World," and that was how they knew what the ride was going to be. So it was all these little dolls. I'm sure you know what "It's a Small World" is. Literally while they were prepping the ride, which, by the way, the Imagineers had a lot on their hands at the time. It was not a huge organization like it is today. So they were already making great moments with Mr. Lincoln and Carousel of Progress and Tiki Room and all these rides. So they would push Walt through the ride on the boat because they hadn't filled it with water yet. So while they were prepping it, the Imagineers would literally push Walt Disney through the ride on a boat, which is amazing. Flash forward to a couple years later, the ride opens in Disneyland. They didn't know that any of this was going to happen. They didn't know that any of the rides were going to move to Disneyland. They thought it was going to happen at the World's Fair. That was going to be it. Walt moves to Small World, just picks it up, brings it to Disneyland. It's outside in this beautiful facade. Then it opens with Walt Disney World in 1971, except that the facade is indoors. That's really the only real difference. A couple little small ones in the ride. There is an It's a Small World in every Disney park around the world. The most different one is in France. There's a woman named Mary Blair who's an iconic Imagineer. She did all the artwork, and she did a lot of the artwork for Alice in Wonderland, Peter Pan. She has that sort of pastel look. They didn't use her art for that incarnation of the ride for the first time in any incarnation of the ride, which is okay. And it's also one of the only ones that has the Middle East as a country on the ride, which is the big controversy with It's a Small World is that in Disneyland they added Disney characters a couple years ago. This was the first time that IP was really used in the parks, and the first time that classic ride was changed. People were angry. People rioted. There were news articles that were saying people are pissed, really, really mad. Then it happened, and people were like, "Oh, actually, this is pretty cool." And now when you go on the ride, you can see Disney characters, and they updated. They put Toy Story characters, they put Brave characters. That's what they did with It's a Small World. That's It's a Small World. There you go.
So world.
Really, really great work, Cal.
In the Indian Village. That is right.
Start that timer, baby.
The Tomorrowland Transit Authority People Mover. Let's talk about it. First, its history. It came with Tomorrowland. That actually might not be true. Don't quote me on that. But the People Mover was meant. It's not really meant to be anything. So when people tell me it's their favorite ride, I'm like, fuck you, dude. Let me say that first of all, because it is a ride whose success is contingent on the success of other rides. It goes through. You're going through Space Mountain, Buzz Lightyear, probably Tron soon, because I know the People Mover is down for heavy renovation, and that comes at the same time as Tron Light Cycle Run opening in Walt Disney World. So you think that those two things would coincide. That being said, the People Mover is not its own ride. It stops all the time, which it has to, and it should. But you're in the dark. It's fine. It's fine. It mostly exists as an image, right? You're walking through Tomorrowland, there's a thing just going around, you're like, that's the future. That's why the People Mover exists. Now, we have to talk about what happened to the People Mover in Disneyland.
What happened to the People Mover at Disneyland?
Will, I'm so glad you asked. Enter Michael Eisner. Michael Eisner was really, really, really bad for the parks. He did a lot of bad things, such as opening Disney's California Adventure, which historically sucks. It's better now, but it sucked back then. The People Mover, he was like, we need more thrill rides. These teenagers, they're not coming to Disneyland. The teenagers, they don't like Disneyland. So they opened Videopolis and stuff like that in California Adventure. So they needed more in Disneyland.
Hollywood Adventure.
That's right.
Superstar Limo, that's true. So they replaced People Mover with Rocket Rods, a high-speed roller coaster that was going to change everything. Except that the problem with the People Mover is that it goes straight, and then it turns, and then it keeps going straight. So this roller coaster was just you guys in a car going and it's historically known as one of the worst rides of all time, also including Superstar Limo, which you had referenced as Drew Carey's Hollywood Adventure, which is essentially what it is. That's right. So that's what happened to the People Mover in Disneyland. And then Rocket Rods closed because everyone hated it universally. It was awful. And the People Mover also closed in Disneyland. But you can go and still see the vehicles around. And they use the vehicles for some other fun stuff, I think maybe some shelving in Buzz Lightyear, but maybe that's for something else. It's probably for something else. But the People Mover is still alive and well in Walt Disney World, and it is going under major refurbishment. What is the major refurbishment? We don't really know, but it's exciting. I have a personal vendetta against the People Mover because of what I said at the beginning, but also because there was a thing that Disney parks did called March Magic. It ran for 3 years, and they were like, we can't keep doing this, where people on the internet would vote for their favorite Disney rides every year, and it was like a March Madness bracket, and the People Mover won. The People Mover won? Over every other ride? It's the People Mover. It's not the best ride ever. Shut up! End of my thing.
Wow, I love that.
Two things. First thing, Thomas, I do apologize for snapping at you, but there are rules.
No, that was so funny. No interruption.
Trust me, I've been snapped at for talking too much before. It's okay.
Is it over? Okay, I'll do Tower of Terror.
Okay, ready, everybody? And everybody watching, I don't know if Andrew explained the rules, so I'll just say it really quickly. We cannot interrupt him. It is not allowed. We just have to deal with this for 3 minutes.
Okay.
And my favorite part, as I always say, don't force this. It will happen naturally. Is watching everybody's face slowly, watch the life slowly. Okay, ready?
Okay.
Go.
So the Tower of Terror came with Hollywood Studios, which was originally MGM Studios, but that was never going to be a park. It was just going to be a little thing they were going to do. But then all of a sudden they were adding more and more and more, and they were like, well, we really want to do a drop tower, and we want it to be a little bit scary because drop towers are naturally scary. So they went through a couple of different versions. There was going to be like a Vincent Price narrated themed version, and then there was going to be like a Mel Brooks themed version, and that was the version they were going with for a long time. It was called Hotel Mel was the working title, and Mel Brooks was involved for a long time, but they kept going in a certain direction that Mel Brooks wasn't on board with. So they're like, what do we do? What do we do? They recently acquired ABC. So they're like, Twilight Zone would be sick. But there's no Twilight Zone without Rod Serling, and Rod Serling is very much dead. So what are we going to do about Rod Serling? So they found this guy. They used archive footage of Rod Serling for the intro, and found this guy that sounds exactly like Rod Serling, or like when he wants to. He's a great voice actor, so he actually does a lot of stuff for Disney parks now. So how does it work? Well, when you're in the Tower of Terror in Walt Disney World, not another Tower of Terrors, you're actually a lot of the time in two rides at once because you're both in an elevator, which is by one company, and a car, a trackless ride system, which is one of the first times this was practically used. So what happens is you're in a car in an elevator. The elevator goes up, the doors open, your car leaves the elevator and goes into another elevator, which then drops. When you're in the Tower of Terror, you are going faster than free fall because it is controlled. So if it was just free fall, it would be the cables would like let go, but they don't. The cables are bringing you down faster than free fall. This was a huge hit in Walt Disney World. Obviously, it became an iconic attraction very quickly. So they brought it to Disneyland and many other parks. I could go on for a long, long time about Tokyo's version, but I won't. I'm going to talk about what happened to Disneyland's version because recently, as many people know, it was revamped to be themed to Guardians of the Galaxy, which people were like, ooh, but then it happened. They were like, okay, yeah, this is cool. We're on board with this. But it's going to obviously tie into a much bigger Marvel Land, Avengers Campus, which is currently being built at Disneyland, which is very exciting. Are we going to get this at Disney World? Well, this ties in to the Universal deal about their theme park rights to Marvel. So the answer is probably not. But if we did, I'm hoping that Tower of Terror is replaced, that we still have one Tower of Terror somewhere because there's already going to be a Guardians of the Galaxy ride in Walt Disney World, in Epcot, so there's no need for a second one. Although I do hope that if Marvel Avengers Campus happens in Walt Disney World, it does happen in Hollywood Studios. The one last thing I want to say is that go check out Tokyo's, it's called the Hotel High Tower Tower of Terror because they don't have Twilight Zone there. It's not as popular. So they themed it to their own original story, starring Imagineer Joe Rohde as Harrison Hightower, who's like this pillaging guy who steals this idol, and then the idol comes to life and like kills him and kills you in the Tower of Terror. It's very, very exciting, and it's one of my favorite stories, and it ties into the Society of Explorers and Adventurers, which I will talk about in a separate episode at some point, certainly. Thank you very much. I have 3 minutes on Carousel of Progress. I'm going to do Carousel of Progress.
Go for it. Okay, here I go. Everybody remember the rules. You cannot interrupt him. You're going to remain on camera the whole time. Part of the fun is watching the light drain from our eyes. Here we go.
Yeah.
Okay, and go.
So the Carousel of Progress, the idea of a rotating theater began when they were going to do an Edison, like a Thomas Edison themed land in, I think it was Disneyland or Disney World, that was going to be like electricity themed. There was going to be a show called, I think it was called Harnessing the Lightning, that was going to be essentially sort of the same thing as Carousel of Progress, but detail more specifically the history of electricity and the way we use electricity. And then that whole entire project got scrapped. I believe it was for the World's Fair, because then they were doing the World's Fair, and they needed stuff for the World's Fair. So they created this whole land in the 1964 World's Fair, sponsored by General Electric, called Progress Land. And this is pretty cool. You should look this up. It was Tomorrowland had already been made, so it was kind of in the same like universe as Tomorrowland. And the big headliner attraction in Progress Land was Carousel of Progress. It went through a lot of different phases, naturally, because the last scene is supposed to be the future. So the same thing as the Tomorrowland problem, which is, I could talk a whole episode about that, but the Tomorrowland problem is that tomorrow always comes. So there's always a great, big, beautiful tomorrow, but that tomorrow becomes today very quickly. So General Electric sponsored this. It was great. Everyone loved it. It was sort of one of the first instances of audio animatronics being used widely. It was the same thing as Great One was with Mr. Lincoln, so kind of the similar audio animatronic situation. They brought it to Disneyland. They brought almost everything from the World's Fair to Disneyland, but General Electric wasn't happy with the song because the song is There's a Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow, but they didn't want people waiting for the products of tomorrow. They wanted them buying them today. They wanted them buying the products that they had today. So they changed the song to a song called, I think it's called This Is the Best Time of Your Life, to say like, well, this is really great, go buy your products now. And that was it for a while. And then years later, General Electric stopped sponsoring them, and they needed to update the attraction anyway. So they brought back the song and updated the attraction, and this is the current version of the attraction, which is now called Walt Disney's Carousel of Progress. The current version of the attraction, the guy playing the grandpa was the voice in the previous incarnation of the dad, which I think is beautiful. And in the final scene, they're going to have to update it again. It has virtual reality, and there's a hidden Mickey on the back of the ship. Like when the virtual reality starts, the grandma goes into the virtual reality. The bit is she's very good at virtual reality. The ship flies by, and there's a hidden Mickey on the back of it. That's the one hidden Mickey. I got to spot every time. I got to go see Carousel of Progress. Got to see that hidden Mickey. I'll talk briefly about the woman who died at America 6, which I've talked about before. But Carousel of Progress, you're sitting down and then you rotate around in your seat. This woman, she was a worker, she got crushed between the walls, and she died, and she screamed, and they closed down the ride. But that was when it was America Sings, which replaced Carousel of Progress with the Bicentennial, and then they moved Carousel of Progress to Walt Disney World, where there's no Carousel of Progress in Disneyland. That's it. Okay.
Oh.
I know a guy who was working security the night that girl died.
No way!